Most people think financial stability comes from earning more, that if they just hit a certain salary, everything will finally feel under control. But that belief quietly traps them for years, because what actually determines your stability has very little to do with how much you make, and almost everything to do with how much your life demands from you every single month. I want you to picture two people living in the same city, in similar apartments, paying roughly the same rent. One earns nearly double the other. Yet one of them checks their bank account with anxiety, while the other checks it with calm confidence. One is constantly waiting for the next paycheck. The other could stop working for over a year and still be fine. This isn't about income. It's about how their lives are structured. The difference comes down to something most people never think about. Every single thing you own doesn't just cost money once. It continues to cost you over time. Not always in obvious ways, but in ways that slowly build pressure. And once you understand this, it changes how you look at every purchase you've ever made. When you buy something, you think about the price. That's the visible cost. But there's a second cost that's far more dangerous because you don't see it. The cost of maintaining it, storing it, managing it, thinking about it, and replacing it when it breaks. Every object you own demands space, attention, and money long after you've paid for it. Think about something simple like a piece of furniture. It takes up space in your home. That space has a cost. You're paying rent or mortgage for it, whether you realize it or not. It also needs cleaning, upkeep, and mental attention. Multiply that across everything you own, and suddenly your possessions aren't just sitting there, they're actively costing you money and energy. This is where most people lose control, not through big mistakes, but through accumulation. They slowly build a life filled with things that individually seem harmless, but collectively become expensive to maintain. And once that life is built, it becomes very hard to step out of it. Minimalist money starts with a shift in how you evaluate everything you buy. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" you start asking, "What will this cost me over time?" Because the purchase price is just the beginning. The real cost is what follows you for years. One of the most powerful ways to think about this is cost per use. Not what something costs, but how often you actually use it. A product that seems cheap but rarely gets used is actually expensive, and something that seems expensive but gets used daily can be incredibly valuable. This completely changes your decisions. It forces you to think realistically instead of emotionally, because most purchases aren't made based on logic, they're made based on how something feels in the moment. And that feeling fades quickly, but the cost stays. Now take this a step further. Look around your life and ask yourself a simple question. If this item disappeared today, would I actually spend money to replace it? Be honest with yourself, not theoretically, but practically. For most people, a large percentage of what they own fails this test. They wouldn't replace it. Not because they can't afford to, but because it doesn't actually add value to their life anymore. It's just there because it has always been there. And this is where things get interesting. Because once you start identifying these items, you realize something uncomfortable. You're maintaining things you don't even want. You're paying for space, attention, and upkeep for things that don't matter to you. That's not neutral. That's negative. It's quietly draining your time, your energy, and your money. Minimalists remove this weight. Not all at once, but consistently. They eliminate what they wouldn't replace. And as they do, something changes. Their environment becomes lighter, their decisions become simpler, and their financial pressure starts to decrease. Another major shift comes from how they approach upgrades. Most people upgrade things not because they need to, but because they feel like they should. A new version comes out, a better option appears, and suddenly, what they have feels outdated. But nothing actually changed. The item still works, it still serves its purpose. The only thing that changed is perception. This is where a lot of money disappears. Perfectly functional items get replaced simply because something newer exists. And when this pattern repeats across multiple areas of life, the cost becomes massive over time. Minimalists avoid this completely. They don't replace things unless they stop working or stop serving their purpose. They separate need from desire. And that single distinction saves them an enormous amount of money over the long run. Another rule that quietly changes everything is creating friction for spending. Right now, spending is incredibly easy. You can buy something in seconds without thinking. That speed removes reflection, and without reflection, you make impulsive decisions. Minimalists slow this process down. They introduce small barriers. They wait before buying. They avoid storing payment details. They remove triggers that push them to spend quickly. At the same time, they make saving effortless. Money automatically moves into savings or investments before they even see it. This flips the default behavior. Instead of saving what's left, they spend what's left. And that difference is huge. Because most people don't fail financially due to lack of knowledge. They fail because their system works against them. Another practice that seems simple but is extremely powerful is awareness. Most people have no clear idea how much they own. Their possessions grow without limits because they never measure them. But the moment you start counting, things change. You realize how much you already have. And once you see that clearly, adding more starts to feel unnecessary instead of normal. This awareness naturally reduces consumption. Not because you force yourself to stop, but because you no longer feel the need to keep adding. There's also a pattern that most people fall into when trying new things. They buy before they experience. They invest heavily in something they're not even sure they'll continue. And over time, this leads to accumulation of unused items, equipment for hobbies they no longer pursue, tools they rarely use, things that once felt exciting but now sit unused. Minimalists approach this differently. They test before they commit. They rent, borrow, or try things at a small scale before making a purchase. This reduces waste and ensures that when they do buy something, it actually gets used. Another hidden factor most people ignore is the multiplier effect. One purchase often leads to several others. You don't just buy one thing, you create a chain of related expenses. A single decision can expand into an entire category of spending, and when this happens repeatedly, your financial load increases without you realizing why. Minimalists think through this in advance. They don't just consider the initial purchase, they consider everything that comes with it, and this often prevents them from entering expensive cycles. One of the most important ideas that separates stable people from stressed ones is defining what enough looks like. Most people never do this, so their expectations keep rising with their income. They earn more, so they upgrade their life. The upgraded life becomes normal, and then they need even more income to feel progress again. This cycle never ends. Minimalists break this by deciding in advance what is sufficient, what kind of home is enough, what kind of lifestyle is enough, what level of spending actually supports their life instead of controlling it. Once that line is defined, everything changes. Because now, additional income doesn't automatically turn into additional expenses. It turns into savings, investments, and freedom. And that leads to the most important shift of all: how you define wealth. Most people define wealth by what they own, the visible things, the house, the car, the lifestyle. But that definition is misleading, because real wealth is not about what you have, it's about what you can choose. Can you walk away from a stressful job? Can you take time off without panic? Can you make decisions based on what you want instead of what you can afford? That flexibility comes from having financial margin. And margin only exists when your expenses are lower than your income by a meaningful amount. Minimalists build that margin intentionally, not by sacrificing everything, but by removing what doesn't matter. And over time, that creates something powerful: stability. Not temporary comfort, but long-term control. This doesn't happen through one big change, it happens through small, consistent decisions. Regularly reviewing what you own, regularly questioning what you spend, regularly simplifying your system, because the biggest mistake people make is treating this as a one-time fix. They declutter once, feel better, and then slowly return to old habits. Minimalists avoid this by making it a continuous process, small adjustments repeated over time. This keeps things under control without overwhelming effort. There's also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you start building financial strength. As your savings grow and your investments increase, your relationship with money changes. You feel more secure, more stable, less reactive, and that reduces the emotional need to spend. Because a lot of spending isn't logical, it's emotional. It's driven by stress, insecurity, or the need to feel better in the moment. When those emotions are replaced with actual security, the urge to spend naturally decreases. This creates a powerful cycle. Spending less leads to saving more. Saving more creates security. Security reduces the need to spend, and that further increases saving. Over time, this compounds into real wealth, not flashy wealth, but stable, flexible, meaningful wealth. The opposite cycle is just as real. Spending everything creates stress. Stress leads to more spending as a temporary escape, and that deepens the problem. Most people are stuck in that cycle without realizing it. They think the solution is more income. But income alone doesn't fix behavior. The real solution is control. Control over what you own, what you spend, and what you choose to ignore. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about money, it's about how you live your life. You can build a life that constantly demands more from you, or you can build one that gives you space, flexibility, and peace. Both are available. The difference is in your decisions. So the question is simple. Do you want to spend your life maintaining things you don't need? Or do you want to build a life that supports you instead of controlling you? If you take this seriously, start small. Look around your space and identify things you wouldn't replace. Remove them, notice how it feels. Delay your next purchase. Give yourself time to think. See how often the desire fades. Define what enough looks like for you. Write it down and stick to it. Because financial stability isn't something you reach by accident. It's something you build intentionally. And if you want more ideas like this that actually help you simplify your finances and build real control over your money, subscribe to Drawn to Wealth. Because the goal isn't to own more, it's to need less and live better.